Why is the Pentagon going to ask Congress for an additional $200 billion?
Well, we're asking for a lot of reasons beyond even what we're talking about in Iran. This is a very volatile world, and the military equipment, the power of some of this weaponry is unthinkable. You don't even want to know about it. Oh, you could end this thing in 2 seconds if you wanted to, but we are being very judicious. We want to be sure, and it's a small price to pay to make sure that we stay tippy top.
Do you intend to potentially put U.S. troops or more troops in the region?
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you, but I'm not putting troops.
The House Speaker, and in the House side, obviously, and the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, both were very non-committal on the question of whether they could get the votes for what the president is clearly going to ask for, which is a big chunk of change, perhaps as much as $200 billion to go for funding more of this war. And I'll just tell you what John Thune said specifically to our colleague Ted Barrett. I think they're going to have to show us how they want to use it.
I mean, that makes clear a couple things. One, it seemed to be a number that the Washington Post first reported that was also news to the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader. So clearly the work had not been done to pave the way for this. But it is going to make one thing clear. Yes, there has not been a congressional vote to authorize this war, but paying for the funding effectively will be that. There is going to be a war debate over the funding. So Senate Majority Leader John Thune, he said that they're going to have to show it, but also they're going to specifically have to go through why the war was necessary now, what the objectives are going forward. So this is really going to be the true test of MAGA and President Trump's ability to persuade people, because several House members, Lauren Boebert and others, are telling our colleagues on Capitol Hill that they are not going to vote to authorize any more money. So that means that Democrats will have to join some skeptical Republicans in this. So anytime this happens, we've covered war funding debates for many years. It is always a bipartisan effort, and it is a contentious one. And there is going to be effectively a war authorization vote through this spending bill.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how much Democrats want to play ball on this,
right,
as opposed to in years past, in conflicts past. Let's just play a little bit of Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, this morning when asked about the $200 billion that was reported.
$200 billion. I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future.
So it takes money to kill the bad guys. And Liz, I want to bring you in 1 second, but I do quickly want to play what Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska said this morning about this.
The people in Alaska are asking me, how long is this going on? Are there going to be boots on the ground? How much is this going to cost? To what extent is the Congress engaged in this? And the answer on most of this is, I don't know. The administration is going to have to walk us through whether it's $200 billion or some other iteration of what the supplemental will be.
Liz Goodwin, and by the way, welcome to Inside Politics.
Thank you.
What's your reporting on this debate?
Yeah, so Republicans have been pretty wary about the rise in gas prices that we've already seen as the conflict keeps dragging on now into its third week. And I think what we're seeing here is there's a pushback on the idea of what is the strategy? If you're asking for $200 billion, that sounds like a very long effort. That's a lot of money. So there's a desire to hear an end game. There's a desire to hear, how do you get out of the situation where the strait is closed? There's frustration that senators have even said out loud now, Republican senators, about they don't feel as if the administration was prepared for the energy repercussions that they unleashed by starting this war. And I think that's what they're demanding to see before they give this a blank check.
And you just heard the president talking about that, insisting that he actually thought that it could be worse, that he was very much prepared for the energy repercussions. I mean, it's unclear if that is the case and how you define worse, because it's getting harder and harder, not just for the U.S. and maybe the least for the U.S., because the U.S. is now much more energy independent than in the past, but for other countries around the world, especially, as I mentioned, Japan, who is represented by the Prime Minister there today. He was asked about whether more troops are going to go in. He claimed no. He's dealing with whether or not and how to get Congress, a reluctant Congress, to spend a lot more money on this war. And just as we're talking, there's more evidence that there's some issues with the economy, which matters so much. And that is that mortgage rates just jumped to the highest level in more than 3 months.
Look, so much is now stacking up that it really, when you go back to the very first hours and days of the strikes on Iran, when the president, of course, he's been all over the board on this, compared it to Venezuela, it makes it clear how different in every way this is, economically, historically, militarily. So this is something that is now a challenge that really are mounting for this White House, politically and militarily. So it's unclear. The president clearly does not want a long war. We've heard him talk about that forever. It's not his choice necessarily now. Asking for that $200 billion, I think, is the most a telling sign that this is going to be the soundtrack of the midterm election campaign. This is going to be front and center in everything politically. And militarily, the objectives are still a little bit unclear. I mean, the president said he's not going to send more troops in, but there are 5,000 Marines en route there now. So some experts are saying that they could be used to sort of reopen the Straits of Hormuz. That is also an incredibly fraught matter.
Major John Spencer is the chair of war studies at the Madison Policy Forum. He also heads up the Urban Warfare Institute and joins me now. Thank you so much for taking the time. It really is good to have you on the program. So let's pick up with this question of whether we will see U.S. boots on the ground and what that actually constitutes, because there had been reporting that the president is looking to send the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, that's some 2,500 or so troops, to strip Iran of its ability to essentially hijack the global export market there for oil and natural gas. And in fact, General Frank McKenzie has suggested that Marines could seize Harg Island and use it as a bargaining chip. So not bombing the infrastructure, as the president said they wouldn't do, but sort of a continuation after they took out their military infrastructure on that island. Do you think that that is the right call? Do you think that that would actually set Iran back and stop its attacks on energy infrastructure and open up the Strait of Hormuz? And a follow-up, does that then constitute boots on the ground?
Well, thanks for having me. Do I think it's a smart move? Well, I don't have access to all the intelligence. I definitely think the role of the U.S. military is to give the president options, and maneuvering those Marines into position is to give them options. Strategy isn't a plan that you start on day one and you just check off a checklist. It evolves in the uncertainty of what the enemy is doing. Definitely, that's a core Marine Corps mission, is to seize an island, hold it. Is it a possibility? Absolutely, it's a possibility. I'm not, of the boots on the ground. As a war scholar, I can say that the worst thing you could ever do is tell your enemy what you're about to do, what you're willing to do, and what you're not willing to do. So, as the president said a few minutes ago, basically nothing's off the table. There's no plan. You don't want your enemy knowing what you're going to do. I can say with strong conviction that I don't believe people that want to take boots on the ground then transfer that to ground invasion, transfer that to nation building. I was a part of the invasion of Iraq, over 170,000 troops. That's not what I believe this U.S. administration is even considering.